Milwaukee Public Television is proud to present Next Avenue Community Conversations. Next Avenue brings baby boomers and beyond smart, useful information and compelling perspectives. Our goal is very simple: to provide provocative information that makes your life more meaningful and enjoyable. This program is made possible in part by funding from our good friends at the Helen Bader Foundation. On this episode, a community conversation about health, well-being, and the art of happiness, featuring Marquette University psychology professor, Dr. Anees Sheikh. We're coming to you from the beautiful facilities of St. John's on the Lake in Milwaukee. Now here's your host, Mark Siegrist.
Well, good evening. It's a real pleasure to once again be with you for our second season of Next Avenue's Community Conversations. We're speaking to you from the very beautiful setting of St. John's on the Lake here on Milwaukee's east side. The view is certainly a very fitting one, of course, for our chosen topic of the evening: happiness, health, and well-being. Just what is the connection between all three? How do we achieve happiness and then maintain it? How does happiness lend purpose to perhaps life itself? We couldn't have a more gifted speaker for our topic. He is Dr. Anees Sheikh from the Department of Psychology at Marquette University. In addition, Dr. Sheikh has long been associated with psychiatry and behavioral sciences at the very fine Medical College of Wisconsin. He's also a licensed psychologist. So I invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy his insightful presentation. Please help me welcome Dr. Anees Sheikh from the Marquette University. Doctor?
Thank you, Mark. I always start my talk by asking people to take a few deep breaths. So would you do that? A few really deep breaths, a lot deeper than you normally do. When you take the breath in your mind, say, I am. When you breathe out, say, relax. I am relaxed. And now I'd like you to bring a smile to your face, and do me a favor, keep that smile on for the whole hour. Because we know now, there is proof for that when we are in a good mood, smile comes easily to our face. But if we bring a smile to our face, then good mood follows. There's no doubt about that, okay? If you keep your smile on, you will be in a better mood. For example, if you hold it this way or hold it this way. They did a study where half the people held it this way and the other half this way. And those who have the pencil within their teeth, when you tell them a joke and then you ask them to rate the humorous quality of that joke, how funny was that joke, people rate the same joke funnier when they are like that, which is because this movement already makes your face smile. So you are smiling, consequently, funny things seem funnier to you. We cannot really talk about happiness meaningfully without talking about purpose and meaning. Purpose and meaning are a prerequisite for happiness, but they are not enough. They're not a sufficient condition. There are people, for example, who are blowing up places, the suicide bombers, they have a purpose, but most of them are not really happy. They are driven. Can someone make it a little louder? Okay, I'll try to speak a little louder. Sometimes I start my class by asking a student, what did you get out of bed this morning? And the student maybe says that I had to go to a class. So what's the big deal about going to a class? You say, I have to graduate. I say, what's the big deal about graduating from Marquette University? Then I can go to grad school. What's the big deal about grad school? Then I can get a good job. So what's the big deal about a good job? When you keep pursuing it, at the end, almost always, the student says, because I want to be happy. And then if I push them one step further, what's the big deal about you being happy? Then I can make others happy. No wonder when they asked the Dalai Lama, what is the purpose of life? He said very clearly, the purpose of life is to be happy and to make others happy. If you can do just that, be happy and make others happy, this earth will be heaven. But something must else be going into that. I can't just say, you be happy. That's the purpose of life. To be happy, we have to do a few things. And now we have a very good idea what we have to do to be happy. But the rub is, it takes work. So you have to work hard on being happiness. It just does not come just like that. I stumbled on a few things. In my classes on psychology of death and dying, and in my death imagery workshops, which I used to do around the country and abroad, I would do a little exercise that suppose the Almighty comes down to you and says, I'll let you live provided you give me 3 good reasons for your living. And if you can't come up with 3 good reasons, then I'll take you away. You're just wasting time here. And whether I did that with young students, whether I did that with older people, whether I did that in this country or abroad, men or women, 3 reasons, the 3 categories of reasons that are given by people. Those are extremely common. What are the 3 reasons? The first category of reasons is, for example, a mother may say that you got to leave me here because my kids love me, they need my love. Or someone says, you got to leave me here because my friends will be devastated if you take me away. So all of these reasons have to deal with the positive interpersonal relationships. And the second category of reasons is that I have to appreciate the beauties in life. I haven't done enough of that. I've been stuck in this and stuck in that, and I have not had time enough to appreciate the wonders around me. And the third category is that I have a lot of potentials. I just started medical school. I know that I'm going to be a good doctor. I know that will make me happy. I know that I will do a lot of good in the world. You got to leave me here. I have to go to medical school. Or I have been dancing to other people's music so far. I have not danced my own song yet. I have not danced my own dance yet. I have not sung my own song yet. You got to leave me here. So love and positive interpersonal relationships, realizing your potentials, and appreciating the beauties around you. These are the 3 things, to me, it seems very clear, that give purpose to life and then in turn lead to happiness. Now, any one of you I challenge, make sure that there's a lot of love and positive feelings flowing between you and others, and a lot of positive relationships that you have, and that you are doing what you are really meant to do, what you really have a good potential for, and you are appreciative of all different kinds of beauties around me. You show me that person, and I will show you a happy, healthy person right there. It just does not seem to be impossible or it does not seem to be possible that if you do all that and you're not happy and you're not healthy. Now, all of you really know what happiness is. You all have a good idea. But the researchers who have been studying this topic, they talk about life satisfaction. Some measures are that the title life satisfaction, others quality of life or subjective well-being. These are all synonyms for happiness. There is one particular happiness scale, happiness test that has been used very commonly. It looks at 4 things in a person's life: how engaged you are, and how victorious you are, how many wins you are having in your life, in areas where you do care to have wins, and how much pleasure you are having, and how much meaning there is in your life. Ages ago, Aristotle talked about happiness. He used the term eudaimonia, which is being true to yourself. Figuring out what are your real basic important virtues, then cultivating them, and then living your life according to those virtues. There's a famous psychologist by the name Abraham Maslow. He talked about the self-actualization motive, which is basically you look at what your real potentials are, and then you live your life realizing, blossoming those potentials. And that is the way to be happy. He has a famous sentence: what a man can be, a man must be. And same stands for women too. What a woman can be, a woman must be. If you do not realize, if you do not develop your talents, they say that our unexpressed talents can actually suffocate us and actually make us really miserable. Now, Buddhists have done a lot more in this area than others. According to them, happiness is a deep sense of flourishing, which comes out of an exceptionally healthy mind. So that is their goal. Now, are people born happy? Some people are born happier than others, or is there something that we can do about it? If we can't do anything about it, then there's no sense talking today. The very rough idea that the psychologists have, they say that the 50% is determined by our biology. Some of us are luckier. We have a higher set point, as they call it. So 50% is taken care of that. These people are going to be pretty happy even though they don't do much. Then the remaining 50% is divided into 40 and 10. 10 is the circumstances, things that happen in our life, and 40% is our own doing, on which we have self-control. But the Buddhists will say that even the 50% that is set by our biology, it is not firmly set. We can do something about it, particularly if you work really hard. And they have developed all sorts of wonderful meditations. They claim, and the science is confirming it, that those meditations actually end up changing the structure of our brain. So you can go a long way by your own efforts. We have also asked people that can you go back in your life, think of a moment when you were really ideally happy, a moment of extreme happiness in your life. What was that like? What was happening in that moment? And they tell us a few things. They said that there is a momentary, at least, disappearance of any conflict. Their mind does not have any conflict in those moments. They feel that they are in harmony with the world and in harmony with themselves. And they say that in that moment, the past was not putting any burden on their mind, and the future was not taking their attention away. They were in the here and now. So one simple thing that is mentioned by various spiritual traditions and psychologists too, be here now. That's where happiness is. That's where life is. Past is gone. That is history. Future is yet to be. All you have really is the moment. And the happiness is found in the moment. It's not back there. It's not over there. It is in the moment. And also in those moments, they said they had a profound sense of deep calm and peace. And they felt very selfless in those moments. And then they felt united. They felt as if the world is in them and they are in the world. People are within them and they are in the people. The trees are in them and you are in the trees. So there's that, what we call unitive kind of consciousness in the mind. Okay, we also differentiate between pleasure and happiness. A lot of the time when you say you are happy, you really are not happy. You're just having some pleasure. Now, unlike happiness, pleasure is dependent on circumstances, and pleasure is generally dependent on our senses. When you put a nice, juicy piece of steak in your mouth and you say happy, you're not happy, that's just a pleasure, a momentary thing that you are having. Or when you're having sex, that is pleasure. Pleasure is unstable by nature. It does not last forever. You get habituated to the same thing that was providing pleasure to you. If steak provides some pleasure to you, eat another steak, another steak, another steak, you will lose any pleasure in taste. So you become habitual. You have to have more of that. And eventually it might even become unpleasant. You might say, I can't stand steaks because you have had so many of those. It's generally linked to an activity. Pleasure is linked to an activity, whereas happiness is not necessarily linked to any activity. You might just be sitting under a tree doing nothing and experiencing profound happiness in that moment. Pleasure also generally descends into selfishness, and you can think about that in your life. Pleasure can also be joined to cruelty, to violence, and greed and pride. Many people end up getting pleasure out of hurting others in all sorts of ways. So now you have some idea what pleasure is not, and also some idea what pleasure is. What's so great about it? Is there any use for that, other than just feeling good at that time when you are happy? Does it do some good for you? Well, the number of relationships we find. Happy people are healthier, both physically and psychologically. If they get sick, they have a speedier recovery. If you're happy, you get better fast. Happy people live longer, and these are all confirmed finding. As a matter of fact, I'm not saying anything which does not have any scientific support behind it now. Happy people live longer, as I told you. Happy people are more tolerant kind of people. Happy people are more creative people. Happy people tend to be more curious people. If you have to make decisions, happy people generally make decisions faster than others. They take their time, but they're not stuck on that. They end up making decisions in a relatively shorter time. They select challenging goals, they persist longer, and they end up performing better. They have more closer friends. They enjoy better marriages. Their students like them better. They like their students better. They make better bosses. They enjoy better marriages, happy marriages. They consume less and conserve more. So if you go around looking at people, those who are really wasting water or wasting resources, and those who are not, and you will find that the happier people are doing less of that. When it comes to spending money and saving money, happy people generally have higher bank balances than the unhappy people. If you look at traffic accidents, we find that happy people generally have fewer traffic accidents. And if you look at people wearing seat belts, and we find that happy people are more likely to be wearing their seat belts than the non-happy people do. When they talk to each other, there is less small talk and more substantive kind of talking that they do. And you find a higher degree of diversity in their life. For example, the friends that they have, they come from diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures. In all sorts of ways, there's more diversity in their life. And I'm sure even at the eating habits, if you notice that maybe the happier people are a little more adventurous in their eating. They try out different things better. Okay, what is our goal? Is our goal extreme bliss all the time? Research shows that all these good things that I mentioned that follow out of happiness, and many of those in turn end up making you happier. So these are circular relationships. Happy people have fewer accidents lead to their happiness, etc. Research shows that if you are interested in all of these benefits that I mentioned and many more, then we should be moderately happy most of the time, occasionally miserable, and occasionally experiencing extreme bliss. But most of the time, just pretty good. Then you will get more done. If you are in an extreme bliss, you'll be all blissed out, and you won't be accomplishing anything. And if you're miserable, then of course you don't accomplish much. Okay, how do we measure happiness? Well, there are 3 or 4 or 5 different ways that are available to us. One is just asking people, how happy are you? You can, sometime we just have a one-question test. Where do you rate your happiness? Sometimes we have a number of different questions, 10, 15, 20, 50, 100, all aiming eventually at getting at your happiness in different ways. These questions that you ask people, they have a little problem because the person might not be telling the truth. They might be making themselves seem happier than they are, so that problem is there. But even in spite of that, these scales are pretty reliable, pretty valid as we find it. Another way is, instead of asking that person, or in addition to asking that person, you ask others who are around them, their families, their friends, their bosses, their subordinates. Ask them, how happy do you think that person is? Another way is that instead of asking these people, we just observe them. We can artificially induce different kinds of moods in people using chemical means. You induce good mood, and then you see how they behave. So you're not asking the person, you're just observing their behavior. And then another measure which has become available to us only recently, which is a physiological measure. You don't go by observing the person. You don't go by asking the person any questions or asking anybody other than them any questions. You just look at what is happening in their physiology, in their brain. And with the development of MRI, psychology research has advanced a good deal. So you can very reliably tell by that measure whether that person is happy or not, and if happy, how happy. But MRI is a very expensive technique. We can only study 2 or 3 or 4 people. But using that technique and using Buddhist monks from Tibet as the subjects, we are finding some fantastic stuff. There's a collaboration going on between the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Dalai Lama's office in India, and lots of good findings coming out of there. Okay, can our imagination, our power of imagination help us in any way? In my classes, I generally ask students to do an exercise, which is, I call it imagining your blessings. Basically, I just ask them to let their mind go to a time in their life when they felt really happy. Maybe it was the birth of your baby, maybe it was the day you fell in love, or maybe the day you succeeded at something, or awards, some big award was won by you. And then just look at the image. Just keep that image in your mind. And we find, I used to do that a long time ago, but now recently I found out there is actually scientific proof for that, that if you bring images of happy events in your mind, they actually bring about the same feelings that you felt when those things actually happened. There is something we call our stream of imagination. All the time, there are images going in and out of our imagination. And if I could have access to your stream of imagination, and one way that we do that is asking people to carry beepers with them and tell them whenever it beeps, you put down whatever is going on in your imagination. And if your stream of imagination carries more happy images day in and day out, you are likely to be a healthier person, you're likely to be a happier person. So the more happiness you carry in your mind, the happier you will be. Is there any relationship between happiness and aging? I see people of all ages, from very young to very old. Aging has really no relationship, almost zero relationship. People have a tendency to become more positive in their life as they grow older, provided they are not physically miserable. So you can't say that I'm getting older or you're getting older, so you can't be happier. In old age, as you get older, the highs are generally not as high, but to compensate for that, the lows are not as low, so you end up having the same. And another piece of good news is that with age, we do get a little wiser. Younger people might not believe that you are getting wiser. But when it comes to what we call intelligence, there maybe we are suffering we are slower in many ways. But wisdom, we gain in that. So you can brag about that. And there's something called generativity. Generativity is when you get older, you have done work in your life, you have the job, you raised a family, you had a home, and accomplished most of the things that you wanted to accomplish. Then very naturally, if we are healthier human beings, we naturally have this tendency to pay back to the society. Society did so much for us all those years, and now we naturally have a desire to pay back. And if we act on that desire, that would make the older people happier. Okay, then the last topic is enhancing happiness, and I'm sure that's what you came here for mostly. Let's find out how to become happier. First of all, it's the obvious thing, taking care of your physical health, exercising, eating right, having good sleep, and so on. When I decided to teach the psychology of happiness at Marquette, which was about 6 years ago, and I was doing a lot of reading. When the course was on the books, people would ask me, "What is this course about? What are you going to be talking about?" My understanding at that moment was, after all that reading, that if I had to explain that in a sentence, and that's what I did to those people who asked, I said, to me it seems that the crux of happiness is getting off of yourself and getting into others. That's where happiness really lies. Then I came across a recent book on happiness. In the very first chapter, in the very first paragraph of the first chapter, he says, let me tell you what this book is all about in this first paragraph. Then he says that I don't even need a paragraph. I need a sentence to tell you what this whole book is about. And I really need not even a regular sentence, just 3 words. And the 3 words are, and there's a lot of research that is supporting this idea, other people matter. Other people matter. Our positive relationships with other people, our social relationship with other people, those are the most important condition for achieving happiness. No 2 ways about it. There's no doubt about it. Other people matter. Get off of yourself, off of that high horse, and get into others. And that will bring about a good deal of happiness. Related to this other people matter, there are a number of factors, but they all relate to people. One is sense of gratitude. People who express gratitude to others are happier people. You start doing that today, and I bet you in a month you will be a happier person. I always, in my happiness class, I tell the students, think of someone who did a great deal for you, but you never really fully thanked that person. Maybe there was a high school teacher, maybe it was somebody else, some aunt or some cousin or whatever. Write a letter of gratitude. Sit down, take the moment in my class right now, write the letter of gratitude. What you did not say it in that letter. And then I encourage them, if they can, track that person down, actually mail that letter. And a number of wonderful relationships developed as a result of those gratitude letters. I highly recommend that you concentrate on expressing gratitude to other people. And then kindness is another thing. Dalai Lama says, my religion is no more, no less. My religion is kindness. My religion is kindness. Call me a Buddhist if you want to, but my religion is kindness. Forgiveness is another one. It does not come easy. I know that there's a lot of you sitting there who have not forgiven somebody, and you say, if you ask them to forgive, say, forgive that son of a bitch, I can't do that. That son of a bitch is probably having a wonderful time. You are the one who are suffering. The person who forgives benefits more than the person who is forgiven. The person who is kind to others benefits more than the person that you are kind to. The person who expresses gratitude gains more than the person that you are expressing this gratitude to. And then there are other wonderful words like love and compassion and altruism and all that. They all are really other people matter kind of concepts. A lot of you know what makes you happy, but you don't do that. So find out what makes you happy and schedule those events. Have dates with those events as often as you can. We also carry a lot of toxic kind of relationships in our life. Drop those. Let go of those. Nobody is gaining out of that. If we compare ourselves with others, take time to compare downwards, not always comparing upwards. If you're trying to learn something, it's always good to compare upwards. As they say that if you fly with the eagles, you're more likely to become an eagle. If you fly with the turkeys, then you're going to be a turkey. Focus on changing yourself, not on changing others. We find that married people in general tend to be happier. Religious people in general tend to be happier. We haven't known the details of that. For example, religion is many things. Social relationships is one part of relation. You go to church, you go to synagogues, you get to relate to people. But overall, religious people seem to be happier. People who have enough leisure activity, they are happier. People who are employed, they are happier. People who are conscientious, they are happier. People who are outgoing, that makes you happy. But we find that gender, education, social class, having children, ethnicity, intelligence, physical attractiveness, so many dollars are spent on becoming physically attractive. So much time is spent on making yourself prettier. But the research shows, is not doing much to your happiness. Maybe gives you a little kick here and there, but it does not. So if anything, there's a zero to small correlation with that. Income. We had a very stable finding until some years ago that income adds to happiness so long as you can have a house, you can have a car, the basic necessities are satisfied. And beyond that, income does not make any difference. It was a pretty stable finding over the years. But in the last decade, particularly in the last 5 years, something is changing there. And we are finding that making more money can add, beyond satisfying your basic needs, more money can add to your happiness, provided you use that money in a particular way. One is instead of buying objects, things, you buy experiences. And the best of all, that extra money goes to that factor, other people matter. When you spend that money on others, you get more happiness as opposed to when you spend that money on yourself. I'm sure Bill Gates is spending billions on others. His money is adding to his happiness. Warren Buffett, he's spending billions on others. His money is adding to his happiness. But if you make that extra money and spend it on yourself, or put it in the bank and just feel good about that, and that feeling good is not really happiness. Okay, just a couple of things. One that the Buddhists really talk about a great deal is that's really the crux of our misery, and that is attachment. Attachment, we use the word attachment synonymously with love. If you want to say, I love my wife, say, I'm really attached to my wife. Real love is not possible when you are that grabby kind of attached. So letting go of attachment. And the worst attachment is yourself, your ego. That ego is that real bastard that keeps us miserable. Getting off of that. There's a wonderful story that comes from India. Apparently, this is a historical fact. There was a king in India by the name Janaka, and he had the reputation of being a saint. Then there was a saint who had given up everything, and he had just a simple set of clothes, cotton clothes, a stick, walking stick, and a begging bowl. That's all he had. He had given up everything. One day, this second saint, the real saint who called himself, hears about the king, and he gets very upset. He says, what's this nonsense? He's living in a palace. He has all the conveniences of the world, all the power in the world, and people call him a saint. He is no saint. Saint has to be like me, give up everything. So this saint gets a chance to meet the king, and he verbalizes his feelings. So people call you a saint. You're no saint. And the king says, well, you're an interesting person. Let's go for a walk and talk about this issue. So this saint leaves his stick and his begging bowl in the palace, and they go for a walk. And they got tired, they sat on a bench, and then the man comes rushing from the palace, upset, announces to the king, Sir, the palace is on fire, the palace is on fire. And the king is so calm, he says, well, what is there in that palace that I could call is mine? And while king was saying that, the other guy rushes to the paddle. Say, oh, my begging bowl and my stick, my begging, oh, my stick. So now you know who was the real saint and what you need to do. You can have it all but not be attached to it. And you can have very little and still be attached to it. A lot of misery comes from attachment. And Buddha was the one who first gave us this lesson about attachment. It's very hard, but the more you do it, the better you are. We get attached to our theories in psychology, to our philosophies, and we run a study. We are hoping that the data will support our theory, and it doesn't. And then you run the analysis differently until it ends up supporting your hypothesis. And then, okay, I'll end it with one more story, and that's this is a story. By the way, death has also something to do with happiness. Acceptance of death, encountering the idea of our own death, that is what brings happiness to us in the long run. A philosopher said that the dark background that death supplies brings out the tender colors of life in all their purity. If death did not exist, happiness really would not be possible. We will just waste away our life. Because the story is, there's a group of people, they're talking about, is there life after death or not? And these kind of discussions often get pretty heated. People get excited. Somebody's saying, yes, there is. Another, no, there can't be, and so on. There's one Buddhist monk in that group. He has not said a word. And somebody turns to him and says, well, you guys have studied this more than anybody else, but you haven't said anything. And the monk says, you're asking the wrong question. The question is not, is there life after death? The question is there life before death? If you have a life before death, you wouldn't be worried about that one after. So if you guys don't have a life, get a life. And don't worry about is there more or not. Thank you very much.
Doctor, we really appreciate your knowledge. Come join us here because we have several questions for you from the audience. Folks are eager to follow up. If you'd have a seat, we have a few minutes left in the program. If you'd like to ask Dr. Sheikh a question, maybe get our floor producer John Larscheid's attention. We'll get a microphone to you. I was fascinated by what really stopped me in my tracks when I was listening to your presentation was deciding for yourself the difference between pleasure and happiness. If you play 36 holes of golf, that might give you a lot of pleasure on a given weekend, but it doesn't necessarily give you happiness. If you were to go through a checklist of things in your life that maybe cross over between happiness and pleasure, how do you separate them? What should you be asking yourself?
Well, when you talk about pleasure, a lot of people, the first thing that comes to their mind is having wonderful sexual activity.
I'm blushing.
I was hoping to talk about
sex is pleasure, but sex can also be a source of happiness.
Yes.
Provided if there is a mutuality
Yes.
in that relationship, provided there's a mutual love in that relationship, provided there's some generosity in that relationship. So psychologists who study happiness, they have nothing against pleasure.
Yes.
Pleasure is good. It makes you feel good. And that feeling good does a lot of good to your physiology.
So seriously, in terms of a sexual relationship, it should be the fulfillment of a relationship, not the relationship.
Okay. And when you're playing golf, your golf gives you pleasure, but there are other people around. If you relate to those people well, if there is some wonderful feeling exchanging at that time, then that becomes a very...
And don't press on the game. I mean, open your eyes to what's going on around you. Encourage others who are in your party to have equally as a good a
Press on
time.
the game, but don't concentrate on winning.
Right.
Doing your best.
Which takes discipline.
Yeah. Buddha was, he was very much against competition, except one kind of competition. He said, that one is wonderful. Do as much as you can. That is with yourself.
You mentioned a lot of religious and spiritual references in terms of happiness. The Jesuits, St. Ignatius, as you know, was a huge advocate on a life of simplicity in order to open yourselves up to a less than materialistic world. Mm-hmm. How does that in fact work? When you do lead a life of simplicity, how does it open yourself up to other senses? And how does it separate the clutter in one's life, whether it be physical or mental? If you keep your life simple, monetarily, in terms of your busy day, if you let go of the clutter in your mind and your possessions to some degree, how does that open the gate for more happiness?
My guess would be then you open up to other things that matter. And then again, other people matter.
Absolutely, absolutely. We had a fascinating discussion, Dr. Sheikh and I, before he came out. And his research on imaging and imagery is pretty outstanding stuff. You said that one of the things you ask your students to do is to cut several pieces of a lemon. And you go through this exercise of taste. Explain how that happens.
That is for the skeptics. This is how I get started with them. I just ask them I tell them that mind really affects your body, affects your physiology, and they don't buy that. Then I say, okay, now, can you see yourself in your kitchen? They say, yeah. Can you see your fridge there? Can you open the fridge and see a lemon in there? So take that lemon out, put it on the counter, get a knife, cut it into 2 pieces, and cut a wedge, and squeeze that cold, tart lemon juice in your mouth, and swish that to cold juice in your mouth. And their mouth fills up with saliva. They have to swallow. Mm-hmm. We know that real lemon juice, one function that it has, it increases the salivation process. Imaginary lemon juice also increases the salivation process. So this imagination effect is not restricted just to this salivation. There are all sorts of other bodily functions. If you are in a scary situation, your blood pressure goes up. If you imagine being in a scary situation, your blood pressure goes up. And there are all sorts of other physiological responses that have been studied. Imagination, as I say, imagination is reality. It really is reality. It has real consequences.
And physically, how does it work, doctor? Do the brain nerves actually connect between the imagery and the physical reaction? Is there like a mental connection that bridges that?
Yeah, there is a connection, and how the connection works, we have to just have faith in that. This is clear. There's a real experience that the person is going through, and you study that person's brain. There are some events going on in the brain. And then you ask the person who is not having that experience in reality, just having that experience in their mind. The brain responds the same way, as if the brain is tricked into that. The brain doesn't care whether this is happening in reality or is happening in the mind, because mind is also real. So what you think, what you imagine day long, it is having real consequences.
And you were explaining to me too, doctor, that imagery can also help your memorization. If you were trying to memorize a dialogue from a play or a script with a short story, you could in fact do that through the use of imagery. We only have like about a minute and a half, but how do you do that?
If you're concentrating only the verbal part of it, it's harder. But if the verbal material is accompanied by images, then the stuff gets duly coded, once as a word, once as an image. If you look at the word dog, and then you bring the picture of dog in your mind, you are more likely to remember that than just the word. Now, some words more naturally bring up images in our mind than other words, like concrete nouns bring up images much more readily than abstract nouns. So we find that our memory for concrete nouns is much better than abstract nouns. So memory is helped when imagery is involved.
The mind is just, the mind really is, to a large extent, the new frontier. I mean, you were still learning about the human mind, are you not, in your research?
Yes, and now that we are able to study the brain better with MRI and all sorts of other procedures will be developed. And we will probably have answers to questions which maybe at one time we thought are not possible.
We have to say goodbye. It has been, help me say goodbye to Dr. Anees Sheikh. It has been, Sheikh, it has been so nice to have him with us. Hope you'll be with us for our next edition of Community Conversations, when we'll be pursuing, imagery would help me with my speech, lifelong learning. We'll see you then. Good night. Thank you, Doctor. Doctor, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.